tonight following a single-car accident on Mount Hermon Road in Parsonsburg earlier today. State police say the driver, 16-year-old Mary Beth Vitamin, had just gotten her license 9 days ago. They say she was driving along Mount Hermon Road east of 60-foot Road in Parsonsburg when she just seemed to lose control of her car and landed in the woods.
Next thing I know, I hear her screaming. I look up, I see trees coming at me.
Police say her 15-year-old female passenger was not wearing her seatbelt. She's at PRMC with a broken neck and head injuries.
And I was taking painkillers for it. And then the pain kept getting worse, and I kept needing more. Well, my life was set to go before the accident. I had it all lined up, classes in school, everything. I was set. I volunteered in the church nursery before the car accident. I was just basically babysitting during the church services. It was an easy way to get community service hours because we used to have a certain number of hours before you graduated. I hit 1,001 community service hours before I graduated. Before the accident, my dreams and career goals were to be a cop on horseback. That's what I wanted to be, a mounted patrol officer. At the time, Salisbury Police Department had a mounted patrol unit, but I wanted to help people. So I wanted to be a mounted patrol officer. The accident was on July 11th, 1998. My friends and I had gone to Assateague. We figured a day off, just a bunch of us enjoy a day of summer at the beach. My friend Mary Beth had just gotten her license 9 days prior, and she had a car, so she was driving. My boyfriend had his pickup, and another friend of ours was riding with him, and we were meeting some other friends at Assateague already. On the way back, after everything was done, we were driving home on Mount Hermon Road, and we were trying to get to Rob's grandmother's house. Mary Beth, driving, had no clue where she lived. So Rob was trying to pass us. Mary Beth decided to play chicken on the road and wouldn't let him pass. So every time he tried to pass, she would swerve over and block him. She did that enough times and then lost control of the car and jumped the ditch and went into a whole bunch of trees right just before 60-foot Road on Mount Hermon Road. And next thing I know, I hear her screaming. I look up, I see trees coming at me. And then I open my eyes and I see my grandfather, who had died 5 years prior, standing there, just shaking his head. That was Papa. That was always Papa. Unless he was either nodding, good job, or shaking his head, no. At that very point in time, he was just shaking his head, no. And I don't remember anything else after that as far as accident goes. Once the fire department got to the accident site, I was medevaced in helicopter because of I had a C2 fracture, same as Christopher Reeves, with a C2, C3 dislocation, and a severe traumatic brain injury. So I was flown because nobody thought I would survive the ride, and they didn't think I'd even survive the flight. But got to the hospital, they called Mom and Dad. When Mom and Dad got there, they escorted Mom and Dad straight into the consultation room instead of bringing them in to me. And they told Mom and Dad, with a slew of doctors and nurses that came in, yeah, you need to go home and call your families. Your daughter's not going to make the night. Mom and dad, oh my God, they're trained paramedics. They were paramedics up in Jersey for decades before I was born. So they knew basic medical details and stuff, how it goes. They came back to see me. Mom didn't recognize me. She didn't see me. She walked right past my room, and the nurse said, your daughter's right here. And mom's like, huh? And then the nurse escorted her into where they had me. Mom had no clue it was me. Between the blood and the sticks in my hair, Mom was dumbstruck. And after that, they, mom, mom says she basically fell apart because she didn't recognize me, her own daughter. And she was a medic for so many years up in Jersey. She knew when when you literally have to take someone out of a beaten up car, they're ripped to shreds. She knows what they look like. Seeing your daughter, that's a different story. She wasn't ready for it. Long story short, um, I had to go in to get my neck realigned. Dr. Zant realigned my neck. Thank God. Julius Zant is an angel as far as I'm concerned. He realigned my neck. He did not fuse it, thank heavens. And he put me in a halo with 4 screws in my head. I still have the 4 screw holes. I constantly joke around that I'm missing a few screws and I've got the holes to prove it. But it ended up God fused my neck for me. At least C123, God fused. After Dr. Zant realigned my neck, uh, it was just, he actually told mom and dad the only thing that was left to do was pray. Between the brain injury and healing of the neck, there was nothing else anyone could do. So mom called the family, got everybody in from out of town, out of state. I've heard tons of stories from all around the family of how this one and that one pulled strings to get in and who told what stories to get around cops. Either way, family got in, and while I was in ICU numerous times, while I couldn't do or say anything, because of the brain injury, I couldn't remember anything, including walk, talk, eat, stand, none of it. All I was doing in ICU was, mom and everyone tells me that I was just making sounded like wounded animal noises. Except I would every now and then just sporadically sit up. Why, Papa? Why? Why not? That's the only thing I would actually say. And that's when whenever I did that, is I saw Papa in the ER, in ICU, in the hospital. Every time I saw him, I always asked him, why? Because he was standing there shaking his head. And then after that, I survived the night. And then they said she won't make the week. I made the week. Then they said, okay, you are literally living on a prayer. And every day was just another prayer. And eventually After a couple weeks, they sent me to AI DuPont in Wilmington, Delaware, in the traumatic brain injury unit. It's specifically for underage, for adolescents. And that's where I was for 3 months, where they tried to keep me contained as my brain healed. They tried to bring me back to the mentality I was supposed to be at, the age I was supposed to be at. Learning how to walk, how to talk, how to everything, read the works. After I got home, when I was finally allowed to come home, trying to figure out who I was, trying to remember who I was pure torture. I was trying to step back into my life, a life I didn't remember, a life I had been told stories of. I was told that I used to work nursery, that every Sunday I was doing the church nursery, that I always went to church, that I always did this, that, and the other. And that's the life I tried to step back into. Tried being the key word. And that's how I started to lose myself, because I was still healing. My brain was still healing. And I was trying to become who I was, and my brain wasn't ready for it. The accident affected my relationship with my family and my friends drastically. I was a different person. Everyone agreed I was a different person. Even videos that I see nowadays from back before the accident, yeah, I am nothing like that. When I see videos from a year or two after the accident compared to a year or two before the accident, two completely different people. And I was a completely different person. I didn't need to find new friends, but I felt like I needed to find new friends because I didn't fit with the friends I had, because they were used to the old me and I wasn't that person anymore. My family was the same way. They were used to the old me. They knew how to treat the old me, but I was a different person. So nobody knew really how to treat me. And because everyone knew me for years, nobody was going to say, "Hi, I'm so and so. How are you?" And start with introductions. What's your favorite color? Do you like doing this, that, and the other? Everyone thought they knew all of that from before the accident. Some of it was the same, some of it wasn't. Nobody really knew that part. I was taking law enforcement classes at VOTEC at Parkside High. Actually, it was, yeah, VOTEC, yeah, criminal justice at VOTEC at Parkside. I graduated in class of 2000. Thank heavens that I graduated with my class. I was lined up to join Salisbury Police Department, and I had taken the extra courses and done the extra duties that needed to be done in my senior year of high school to join mounted patrol. Once I graduated, I tried joining Salisbury Police Department. Because of the car accident, because of the brain injury, I wasn't allowed to. Because of the brain injury, the police department wouldn't accept me. None of the police departments would accept me. Because of the brain injury, the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Coast Guard wouldn't accept me. Nobody wanted me. Talk about ultimate rejection. The army takes everyone. The army wouldn't accept me because of the brain injury. Now that is ultimate rejection. Um, One day at church, when my mom was coming with me just to make sure that I didn't flip out on anybody. My temper was a little off right after the accident. Mom came with me to youth group, and my friend had just made a comment. I don't even remember what it was. It was just some sort of smart, funny comment against something I had said. And I got agitated. I was trying to control my temper, and I didn't want to go off on her, so I got up and walked out. I was going to walk it off. I walked into the parking lot and started pacing the parking lot. Mom came after me to make sure I was okay. She came over to me. Kim, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just pacing back and forth. And she touched my shoulder. You okay? And I automatically turned around and wrapped my hands around her throat. And I dug my thumbs into her, right into the center of her trachea. I was about to kill her. I had no malicious intent. I was I had blacked out. I I really have very little memory of it. I vaguely remember doing it. I don't remember feeling it. Um, it's just a distant memory in my head. I'm sure in mom's head it's a much better memory. But I had nearly killed my mom when I went to church. After the car accident, when I was trying to find myself versus step back into my shoes or the shoes I was supposed to be in, I felt, okay, first thing I'm going to do is I need a sturdy foundation. Happy little home with a white picket fence, me and hubby and kids. You know, the picture perfect family in my head. And I went to the store and bought an engagement ring. And I got down on my knee and I proposed to my boyfriend. And he said yes. We were engaged for a bit. And then he gave me it back. He gave me the ring back and said no. And he couldn't do it. And that shattered my heart. That shattered my world. And that started a little bit of a downward spiral. And I got into another relationship with another guy, and he latched in very tightly. And because I was fresh out of the accident, so to speak, my brain was not healed. When I graduated, he just manipulated my brain, and he and his parents combined got me to think that my parents were against me, that mom and dad hated me, and that um, this guy Paul and his parents were trying to help me, and that they were going to save me. So I went closer to them, and he got me to move in with him, and he proposed to me. Obviously, I was elated. I still had the picture in my head of nice little house with a white picket fence and family and kids, nice and happy. And I got pregnant. And it turned out I was pregnant with twins. I had identical twins. Found out as I was going along in the pregnancy, there was a minor complication With identical twins, there's supposed to be a separation membrane to keep them apart, kind of like a volleyball net, so they don't hurt each other. Mine didn't have that. Mine were just both in the same sack. And eventually, when they were 6 months old, when I was 6 months pregnant, I named them Tommy and Timmy, my twins. I'm assuming they were playing with each other, and Timmy wrapped his umbilical cord around Tommy's foot, which cut off the supply of everything to Timmy. Timmy died, and he sank to the bottom of my stomach, and he landed on Tommy's umbilical cord. And Tommy then, he started passing. I knew something wasn't quite right because I could feel them both on the bottom of my stomach. I had a doctor's appointment. I went to Dr. Gray, and when I went to the appointment, he said, I thought it was odd. He said, let's take you to the hospital. They have better equipment. So me and Mom went to the hospital. She drove. And then, as Dr. Gray was just doing a regular sonogram, me, Mom, and Dr. Gray watched Tommy's last heartbeat. And that was it. And I was in total denial. I said, no, you're wrong. The machines are wrong. They're just sleeping. They're sleeping. It was a Friday that I had the scan and everything. So I said, I'm going home. They'll be fine. Well, over the weekend, they began to deteriorate, and my body began to absorb them, including all the good and all the bad. And I, of course, got sick and sicker and sicker. I was in bed most of the weekend. By the time Monday rolled around, I did not look healthy at all. Went to the hospital, and Dr. Gray had to put me in labor. And then once his shift was over, Dr. Casto had to take over. And she increased the dosage of the medication to put me in labor. And I had to deliver my stillborn twin boys. And when I delivered them, the nurse asked me if I wanted to hold them. I couldn't do it. I saw them. She had them in her hands. So tiny. They were about the size, the length of her hand. They were so small and so white. But I couldn't hold them. I couldn't touch them. I said, no, I won't do it. So when I was in the hospital after I delivered the twins, obviously I had to stay a couple more days. They wanted to make sure I was healthy, that I wasn't going to go septic or something. But while I was in the hospital, I obviously couldn't work while I was in the hospital. My boss had brought me a couple of roses. And when I delivered the twins, they bloomed. It was amazing. They were just buds when she brought them in. They bloomed into beautiful, full white roses when I delivered the twins. And they stayed fully bloomed, absolutely beautiful, until I got the twins' ashes back. And once I got their ashes back, I said, you know what? I need to let them go. So I literally was going to let them go. One night, I had already chosen godparents for the twins. So I got the godparents together, and we all went down to the city park, and I sprinkled the ashes on the fully bloomed roses, and I set the roses off down the river. So I literally let them go. And it was a little releasing. It did help a little, but it still hurt a lot. At that time, I basically shut down. I'm pretty sure was when I just shut off my God switch, and everything went south. I started doing the wrong things, lots of illegal stuff, drugs. I was working with witchcraft. Um, I actually started off just with tarot cards and palm reading, just doing studies on that, how to further myself, be a better palm reader. How could I see the future? Stuff like that, trying to work with spirits. Worked into the witchcraft, got really into the witchcraft, really focused on the witchcraft into, I went into the full, the ceremonies and stuff where the full moon versus the new moon versus all that stuff, the different times of the year for different spells, different crystals for different spells, all sorts of different stuff. I made sure everything was right. Um, I got into all the details. I really got into it like it was almost like I was taking a class in witchcraft and I was trying to ace it. Looking back now, that was clearly very, very wrong. But at the time, I was trying. I was trying to, I don't know, I was just trying. I was trying to make my life mean something, trying to be someone, trying to find me. All of that came with, I ended up, because of the car accident, I also had a C2 fracture. And the witchcraft, obviously dragging me farther and farther from God, my neck pain increased drastically, which was actually from bone overgrowth, um, medically diagnosed bone overgrowth. And I was taking painkillers for it. And then the pain kept getting worse, and I kept needing more, 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 more. And then finally it was, I'm not I need more oxy. This isn't enough Oxycontin. This isn't enough oxycodone. This isn't enough. I need more. So I got into the illegals. Crack became my choice, my drug of choice, because it smoke enough of it, it kill all the pain. Killed the pain, all right. It killed everything else too, including all mental status I had. I became very much so dependent on crack cocaine. It fell to the point where I was stuck without crack cocaine. If I didn't have it, I was lost. I had to get the crack. That's all that was in my head. I got to get the crack. I got to get the crack. So that's where I fell to. And finally, I was out of money. I had sold everything I could sell. I had pawned everything I could pawn. I had stolen everything I could steal to get as much money as I could to get crack. And I was renting my car to dealers. And when the dealers weren't bringing the car back on time, and I was still needing more crack, well, there was only one more thing to sell eventually. Me. I became a prostitute, specifically for crack, or for money for crack, either or. And that became a normal thing. Eventually, that was my master downfall. I had become so dependent on crack that I went a week straight on crack, on prostituting for crack. I had been basically, I don't want to say living at a motel. I was jumping from room to room at the motel, going from bed to bed at the motel for crack money. And when there was nobody else to to get the money from, then I would go find the dealer to get the crack from, and then smoke the crack, and then go find a guy that I could sell myself to get money for crack. I All week long, I didn't eat, I didn't drink, I didn't even smoke a cigarette. It was all crack. I rented my car. I got a room at a crack house, and I was prostituting in the crack house. The crack went on for a couple years. The crack house only went on for a few months, on and off. Eventually, one day I was about to prostitute again, um, and something wasn't right. Uh, Something just hit me, so to speak. I couldn't shake it. It was just a feeling something wasn't right. Couldn't get it out of my head. So I got up, I got dressed, got my shoes on, and I walked from Hammond Ave to Philip Morris Drive. And I walked to Christ United Methodist Church, and I walked right in and right up to Pastor Bill Green. It was right about 2011 when I felt the call that something wasn't right the way I was living. So I went back to Bill, and I walked right up to him that day. I knew I reeked of crack. I walked right up to him and Hey, Bill. Sorry I raked. The woman I was babysitting for was cooking something rancid. Mind if I stay for the service? Bill was originally a middle school teacher in New York, in the New York City. So he knew what crack smelled like. He got an ear-to-ear Cheshire Cat grin on his face. And he just said, "You smell just fine. Come on, let's get you a seat." Put his arm around my shoulder and walked me into the sanctuary. Sat me down and we talked until Tech came around and put a microphone on him. And he went up to do the service. And once the service was over, I don't know how, but somehow the little 5'4" stick figure got to the door before me, and I was sitting right next to the door. And on my way out, he said, "Well, what'd you think?" I said, "Well, pretty cool. I think I'll come back next week." And he says, "Good." And he gave me a hug. There was no 5'4" stick figure that gave me a hug. It was the arms of God himself that hugged me that day. Every molecule of air in the entire building surrounded me, and I felt like I was in a nice, warm, comfy cloud. I have never felt so safe in all my life, not even in my own daddy's arms. I knew at that moment this was right. That was where I was supposed to be. That's what changed everything. At that moment, that changed my life. And after that, I walked from church to the gas station at the corner and called Mom and Dad. And I went home. And I don't really remember exactly what happened after that, that exact day. But I know things got rough because everyone was, "Oh, she's a crackhead. You can't trust her. She'll steal from you. Can't trust her. She's an alcoholic. Can't trust her. Can't trust her worth nothing." I had to fight that for quite some time. And I did. Pastor Bill Green was teaching me to be a good disciple of God. I was doing everything at church. I was always joking around that I had a bed stashed in the back room at church because everyone's always saying I was always there. Every church service, I was there. Every event in Fellowship Hall, I was there. I was working tech or security for whatever was going on at church. I just wanted to be at church where I knew I was safe. I was safe with the pastor. I was safe at the church. I was safe with God. And that's what changed my life. I dropped the crack, the streets, I dropped everything cold turkey, all for God. It was all replaced with church. Anytime I got the craving for crack, I went to church and talked to Pastor Bill Green, and he would help me out. He'd give me scriptures. The first scripture he had me memorize was Psalm 91:14. "Because she loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue her. I will protect her, for she acknowledges my name." I now have that scripture tattooed on my left hip. So I will never, ever forget that script. When I realized that crack was more of an idol than just part of life, and it was completely replaced with God, I realized how much joy was in my life, how much I was smiling. I was happy. In church, doing stuff. In church, reading the Bible, learning about God, or just fellowshipping with believers, with Christians. I was happy. I was smiling. I was making other people happy, putting smiles on their faces. I was doing what I always wanted to do ever since I was a kid. I was helping people and making them happy. What I wanted to do when I wanted to be a cop. So what I wanted to do since I was a kid, I was doing all through God, with fully surrendering to God, fully surrendering to God. That's giving God everything, total control. That was difficult. There were steps involved. And you never realize half the steps until you get to them. First, I had to conquer the crack. Did that. And I was abundantly blessed with happiness and joy, and people began to trust me again. People started to be my friends again, I thought. And people were starting to trust me again, kind of. It was a beginning back to what it should have been. And then as I came to each step that I had to take to get back closer to God, each step was a little harder. But each step brought me more joy, more love into my life. And I felt every time I do something more, I feel so much closer to God. I had gotten to the point where I felt I had grown as far as I could without outwardly expressing God. So I decided to hang a cross in the front yard. I was still living with mom and dad at the time. I decided to hang a cross in the front yard. Well, that went over like a fart in church. Dad grabbed the cross and brought it inside, said there's not a snowball's chance, and that was going out there. And yeah, that didn't fly with me. So, long story short, after several arguments and fights and all over that, it was either Dad threatened me. It was either you follow his rule, I follow his rules, and there is no outward religious expression, or get out. So, when Dad put his fist in my face and said, get out, I didn't flinch. That was the Holy Spirit in me. I didn't blink when his fist was in my face. That day, I had been taking seminary classes all day on my cell phone. It was during the COVID period, when everything was closed up, including church. That's when I felt I needed to get even closer to God. Now, obviously, everyone was severely tensed up during the COVID shutdown of everything. But I needed God. I needed to get closer to God. So I was taking seminary courses online using my phone, and I would go off into the corner of the yard. Well, that individual day, I had been off in the corner of the yard, one corner or another, all day. I had come inside just to get my charging wire. And Dad got pissed off, put his fist in my face, and said, and I just said, that's it. I left. And when I walked out, I had a bag on my shoulder. I threw it in my car. I had been not expecting it, but I knew things weren't right at home. So I had clothes and toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, basic essentials in my car already. So I was ready for it. I left. I went in. I ended up stopping at the park. I parked my car and I called Bill Green and woke him up. It was, I don't remember what time it was, but I called Bill in absolute tears and told him what all happened. And I went to the church and I drove to church parking lot. And that's where I lived for 2 months. I lived on the church parking lot. And I was, I had tried it before, times prior, when I had tried to leave mom and dad. I only lasted, maybe I would last the night, but I'd end up barfing my brains out or something, crying too much, and I'd go crawling back to mom and dad. This time was different. At night, it's usually about 9-ish, a fox would come trotting up the driveway at church, at Christ United Methodist Church. And the fox would stop right in front of my car, but some distance away. Just stop and look at me. And I'd always look and glance back, and just the fox stopping and look at me. It always felt like that was God telling me, I've got you. You're good. I always felt like it was him watching over me. So every night when I saw that fox, it felt like a kiss on the forehead from God. And it was just a nice, deep, relaxing breath for me. And I did it. I made it. Did 2 months on the church parking lot. And then I finally found a job and busted my buns. And I got an apartment through Go Getters. And then um, I separated from Go Getters and got an apartment with a friend. Things didn't go very well with that. And then I was going to get a regular apartment, just me. So I went ahead and got my own place. I started off in a little 250 square foot studio apartment, and it was just mine. I did enjoy a little too much enjoyment of my freedom at the beginning. Um, I did start to lack in my Bible studies, but I was always 1000% devoted to God. I always told everyone at work, you can put me on the schedule whenever you want, but yeah, I'm walking out of here to leave for church. Or I'm not going to be here Sunday morning. I don't care if I'm on schedule or not. I'm not coming in until after church. I always made that abundantly clear. Church came first. And whenever anyone would say anything, hey, you don't pay me enough to buy my soul. That was my answer. And they weren't going to argue. They couldn't argue with me. So everyone just went along with that. I basically chose my days off depending on what church was doing. I worked, I pulled overtime to try and bring in extra money so I could get a better apartment. The way I always looked at life was money rules the world. I at least want to say in my life. Well, I was able, I finally was able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment, and I signed the papers for a 1-bedroom apartment. Except I was still being good to God. I was still standing true to Him, staying true to my faith. And God blessed me. Instead of the apartment I had signed the papers for, God blessed me with another apartment in one of the other buildings. And the apartment He blessed me with has the park is right outside my front door. I've got a beautiful oak tree right outside my front door full of squirrels. And He's just blessed me so much with this apartment. With this apartment, I did allow some more freedoms in my life with my boyfriend. And then once I realized that it wasn't the biblical way, no. I told my boyfriend at the time, no. This isn't right. You're too involved with my body and you don't care enough about me. You don't want to be my friend. You don't want to have anything to do with me as a person. You just want my body. So bye-bye and don't come back. And after a little while, I was lonely. It was the emotional and mental loneliness that was really getting to me. And I started breaking down, and I finally prayed to God, help me. I'm lonely. I need some love in my bed. Help me. I don't know what to do. I am not going back to the streets. I am not going to be a prostitute again, but I want love in my bed. Help me. A couple nights later, I'm watching TV and I hear through my window screen, hello, hello, a cat meowing through my window. Hello. I go and look. Beautiful white cat is on my windowsill. When I go over to her, she has a perfect black heart on the back of her ear. I look closer. She has a perfect black heart on the back of her shoulder and on the back of her hip. I fell in love. I could think of nothing else but open the door. I cannot say no to love. So I opened the door and I literally said, come on in, love. And she came right in. And love, I decided to call her Love. And she needed another word after love because I use the word love in a regular speech every day so much. So I called her Love Bug. She responded to that better. But she's constantly sleeping in my covers, constantly sleeping on my bed. So God literally answered my prayer. He gave me some love in my bed. If I could give a message to my younger self, don't leave God. If I could go back in time, I would wrap a chain around my waist and lock it to the church building so I could never leave the church property. But the only thing I would tell my younger self is never lose faith. And the only thing I could say to anyone else is God's got this. No matter what, God will help you through it. Just look in the Bible. He'll tell you everything you need to know. The instructions are right there.